Hi, everyone. I'm Lucinda Krahl. Thank you so much for coming to my talk today. Your software functions, but it doesn't work. Why and how to do usability testing. Before I talk about software, I'm actually going to talk about hardware, something in the physical world that we all experience, and that is microwaves. Most of us have used microwaves and use them almost every day. And they are all a little different. And when you start to look at the different designs of microwaves, they can be kind of confusing. Here's one that is one of my friends. Numbers 1 through 6 have express cook, but then above it, you see a label that says micro cook. And apparently there's 2 versions of micro cook. I have no idea what the difference between those are. For this microwave, there aren't buttons, there's a dial. Pretty self-explanatory. Yet, there's a set of directions beneath it. And there's also this very confusing 2x2 grid showing you how often you should reheat a bagel or a pastry. This microwave just has a bunch of numbers and icons, and I would have no idea how to use this one. I would just eat my food cold because I would have no idea what to do. This microwave is my microwave in my apartment, but if I were to redesign it, I'd really only need these 4 buttons. And also, if I were to redesign it, I would change how it beeps at me. Because when it gets to 0 seconds, if you open the door, it still beeps. 3 very long, annoying, loud beeps. So I've gotten in a habit of rushing to the microwave to try to open it before it gets to 0 seconds. And whenever I do not successfully do that, I get very angry. And I ask myself this question: did they show this to anyone? The answer is probably no. But this isn't just with microwaves. This is in software too. I'll show you an example that I had happen to me recently. So I had to recently change my password. You know the drill. You put in your old password, you put in your new password, you confirm that password, and then I clicked that middle button. I removed the labels so I can prove a point. So I clicked that middle button because it was the thing right beneath where I typed. And what happened was my password cleared. I thought it was some kind of glitch, so I did the same thing. Old password, new password, confirm password, click. And then the same thing happened. And then it was only then that I realized the button I was clicking said clear. Why would you need to clear the inputs when you're changing your password? If I wanted to submit it, I had to click the button on the left. And it made me feel really stupid. Some people may call this user error. However, I think it's actually bad design. And the thing is, bad design is everywhere, even in some of the stuff that we build. But obviously, we don't want that to happen. We want a good experience for the people that are using the products that we build. So most development teams, it goes like this. We should really aim at a better user experience. Yes, indeed, we should. Crickets. Then after launch, you think, why aren't our tools more user-friendly? Man, it beats me. And this is kind of what happens. So that leads me to the question, what do we do in the middle there? What can we do to make a better experience? Well, one of the ways that you can do that is through usability testing. Usability testing, pretty simple. It's just watching people try to use what you create. Watching people try to use what you create. Now, notice that is not a demo. That's not training people to use what you create. It's not a sprint review. It's not making decisions around a table to see what makes sense to stakeholders. It's watching people try to use what you've built. And the reason that that is important is it helps overcome some biases that humans have. The first is known as the false consensus effect. The false consensus effect is this belief that my thoughts, my habits, my beliefs are similar to those around me. It's the idea that there is a consensus, but that is false. So for example, I'm a musician, so I've been able to read music for years. And sometimes I make the false assumption that because I can read music, that's a common experience. And the people around me can probably read music too. But that is a false consensus. And this happens when we're designing products as well. Here's an example that I experienced. This is from a prototype from a design thinking competition that I competed in 2 years ago. I want you to pay attention to the 3 words at the bottom: camera, audio, text. For camera, you could take a picture. For audio, you could record a voice memo. For text, you can make a little note. So whenever I showed this to the people around me, which were mostly software developers, they understood this. But when I showed it to someone who is not a software developer, they thought that text meant that you would send a text message. And that's when the light bulb went off. Oh, the reason software developers understood it is because we use text files. When we create a text file, it is a Word document. But to other people, when they see text, they think it's something that they're doing, that they're texting. And that was the false consensus effect. Another bias that usability testing can help overcome is the curse of knowledge. This is a cognitive bias where people assume that when you're explaining something, that the person has the background to understand what you're explaining. So this is exactly why someone who has a PhD in math might not be able to explain to a 4-year-old why 1 + 1 = 2. It's because they're assuming that the 4-year-old has the background to understand the explanation. And this, again, happens in software. So here's an example from a project I was on. This rectangle that says preferred at the top is a package. So during a usability test, I asked, how would you copy a package? And the person looked at the screen and they weren't really sure. So we asked, if you weren't sure, what would you do? And they still were very uncertain of what to do. Well, it's really simple. You just click the 3 buttons and you hit duplicate. Well, all the people on the team, we had been looking at this for months. And for months, we had been seeing this pattern of hit the 3 dots, do the action, hit the 3 dots, do the action. So we had that background of knowledge. The user that we were testing with didn't have that background of knowledge. So usability testing helped us overcome that cognitive bias. So overcoming these cognitive biases can lead to some benefits. So here, why would you do usability testing? I'm going to go over 5 benefits and show some examples. The first benefit that you can get from usability testing is it can save time. I know that sounds very counterintuitive. You may be thinking, have you seen our project timeline? We do not have time to do usability testing. But think about what you spend your time doing when you're building a product. When you need to make any kind of decision, what happens? You get the developers, you get the business analysts, you get the stakeholders, you get the architect in a room, you probably sit at a conference table, and you try to hash out, what should we label this? What should this button do? What should be the next step? And you might go in circles making that decision, but usability testing can help you just make a decision and test it. I'll show you an example. This is a screen from a usability test that our team did together. So what they had to do was open up an enrollment for one of the companies that they were working with. So we asked, open up an enrollment. And they were supposed to do that by clicking on the word accounts. Oh, can you not see it? Well, turns out they couldn't either. So we made it a little bigger. But they didn't understand where to click. So maybe it was a wording error. Let's change it to clients. They still didn't understand it. So we changed it to groups. And only then did the users understand what to do. And the reason for this is because groups is the industry term. In health insurance, that's what people who were the brokers understood. Accounts was the Salesforce term. That was the term that was used internally. And what I learned is going into this, there had actually been a lot of discussion about what to call this. It had had people at the developer level, people at the director level, even people from the executive level weighed in and went in circles trying to determine what vocabulary we should use. Whereas this took 2 hours of usability testing, and we were able to come up with something that the users actually understood. The second benefit that usability testing can give is it can save money. And a quote that I think really demonstrates this is from Adam Judge. He says, if you think good design is expensive, you should see the cost of bad design. And I'm sure we've all experienced this. You build something and then you have to redo it because it's not exactly how it's supposed to work. Or you launch a product and then people are confused, and so they call into support, and you have to use all of that resources and all that money. So I have 2 stats that can demonstrate how usability testing can save money. First, there was a 90% reduction in support costs after usability testing for McAfee software. And it makes sense. You use support, whenever you're trying to figure out how to do something, and you don't know how to do something if it's confusing to you, or if you just flat out can't do it. So if we make products that people can figure out, you don't need as much support on the back end. A second stat, up to a 50% reduction in rework when usability requirements are determined upfront. And when you think about it, this also makes sense. Rather than dealing with a bunch of bugs that comes up closer to launch or having sprint demos that don't exactly go as planned, you can test with real users or proxy users and be able to figure out those requirements before you actually code them. The third benefit of usability testing is it can lower the risk of the product. And this is why. So on this, you can see 2 lines. The number of design alterations is very high at the beginning because you're trying to figure out what direction you should go, how this interaction works, what this should look like. But as your project goes on, as you get closer to launch, you're making less and less changes. The problem is that the point in development projects typically where you show it to users is right here before launch, called user acceptance testing. The problem with this is you can only change so much at this point. You're so close to launch that if people are very confused by a core task or a core navigation, it's too late. It's too risky to change at that point. What usability testing does is it moves that risk up front. So you can actually have the design alterations that you need to lower the risk of the project. Usability testing moves that earlier on in the project so that you're not waiting until the very risky point right before launch to make any kind of pivot. Another benefit of usability testing is a more engaged team. And what's really great about this is even if you were to test a product and you don't find anything wrong with it, your users know exactly what to do, you can still get this benefit. Because if you involve the developers in the process of usability testing, they see who is being affected by their decisions. And if you don't believe me, let's talk to my team. So our team did a series of usability tests, and I asked some of the developers to rank strongly disagree to strongly agree with a series of statements. 5 out of 5 team members strongly agreed with this statement. Attending usability sessions helped me understand our users better. 5 out of 5, that's amazing. When's the last time you had a unanimous agreement between your developers? And here's a specific quote that I think is very telling. They said, "I learned a lot seeing how an end user interacted with our application. Understanding that better helped me in my development to think through how our decisions would affect the experience of our end user." Look at that last part. How our decisions would affect the experience of our end user. Have you ever been working with a developer and you're trying to make them think how their decisions are going to affect the people using it? Well, it's going to be really hard if they don't actually see the people using it. Usability testing is a way to do that. One more quote that I think is very powerful. They said, "On every client I have been at, they are adamant about knowing their audience, who their audience is, and what they want. And it almost never realizes that way. The product worked well, but failed to meet key needs of the consumer base, and therefore failed." So this developer had been on a former project where they had not shown it to users early on. And then whenever it launched, it didn't do as well as they wanted it to. Either it was confusing or it just didn't address the needs of the user base. If there had been usability testing early on, maybe they could have seen that earlier and they could have pivoted so that it would actually be a successful product. The fifth and final benefit of usability testing, and I think the most obvious one, is you just get a better product. And I'm going to show you a couple of examples. So this first example is going to be a video from an actual user test that we ran. I want you to focus on the icons in the middle. I have a red arrow pointing so you can focus right there.
Okay. What about the plans snapshot? What does that mean to you over there?
There's medical, dental, vision, and I don't know what that last one is.
Okay, if you weren't sure what it is, how would you figure it out?
I would click on it. Oh, life. That's nice.
Did you hear that? Something was confusing to her, and then she did the thing she expected to figure out what it was. And then it worked. It did what she thought it was going to do. And she said, oh, that's nice. And that feels really great. Can you imagine if you were to show the products that your team is building and hear users say, oh, that's nice? That is a really, really powerful feeling. Also, something to note about this is we did not have that tooltip at first. We thought it was going to be very clear what the icons meant. But at a previous usability test, one of the users did the same thing. They weren't sure what it meant. So we were able to react based on that user feedback and then see it actually work with another user, a better product. The next example I'm going to show might look familiar to you. This is the screen that I showed earlier, where the users were confused about whether it was accounts or clients or groups. What I didn't tell you is that this screen never actually made it to production and never saw the light of day. Because not only did the usability test show that people were confused about that label, they were confused about the whole screen. They didn't know what the stats meant. They didn't really know what the tiles were on the right. They really only had a few key tasks they needed to do, and they didn't know how to do it. And this is a product that was supposed to roll out to every single customer. Imagine how risky that would be. Imagine how much money that could waste. But luckily, the team was able to pivot because they did usability testing, and they were able to adjust early on and make a better experience and a better product for their users. So at this point, you're probably asking, great, but how? How do I run usability tests? Well, it's really not that difficult. I did not go to school for user research, and you don't have to either. It's really 3 simple things. Number 1, you need some tasks to complete. Number 2, you need 3 people who have not seen it yet. And number 3, you need an openness to being wrong. And that last one is the most difficult but most important part of this. And if you're thinking, that's awesome, I'm going to try that, but I want a little bit more detail, I'm not the one that's going to tell you that, because a lot of other smart people have done that already. And this is the resource that I have used, that I recommend. It's called Rocket Surgery Made Easy, and it says it's a do-it-yourself guide, and it really is do-it-yourself. It has checklists. It has scripts for you to run. It shows you how to recruit users. It shows you how to convince stakeholders, and it just introduces the kind of problems that you can solve with usability testing. So I highly recommend this resource as a way to learn more about usability testing. But really, it's not that complicated. Again, all it is watching people try to use what you create. If you do that, you're going to have this moment. Someone will say, "Does this make sense to you, madam?" And she will say, "Nope, not at all." And there's you and your project manager in the back on your knees, fists at the sky saying, "No, but I thought it was perfect." That's a really hard moment to be proven that you're wrong. But I promise that is the moment that will convert you. That is the moment where you will realize, wow, this is really powerful. This is a really great way to overcome some of those biases and make a better product. So my call to action is to do something next week, and that is run 1 test and share the results. So make the list of tasks, show it to 3 people who have never seen it, be open to being wrong, and then share the results. Because when you share the results, you can take action. You can save the time. You can save the money. You can lower the risk. You can engage your team, and you can create a better product. That is the value of usability testing. I want to leave you with one last comment. Steve Jobs said, "Design is not just what it looks like and feels like. Design is how it works." I don't know about you, but I would love to create products that people enjoy and that people feel delighted. I want them to use something and feel heard and feel like we have listened to them. If you want to make products that make people's lives better, you can only do that by listening to the people whose lives you're trying to improve. And usability testing is one of the ways to do that. So if you use usability testing and integrate it into building your product, I really think that we can build software that doesn't just function, but also works. Thank you.